Hello everyone, this is Remlaze from 40k Theories, and welcome to the July 2022 edition of the Patreon Q&A sessions. As always, if you would like your questions answered, then click the link in the video description below and help support the channel by becoming a patron. Now let's jump into the questions because it is already way too hot for me and I bloody well hate it. But I digress. Voice of the Emperor asks, could an Ogryn Ripper gun be considered a shotgun version of a bolter? Not really, no, they're two completely different types of weapon. I mean, if anything, the shotgun equivalent to a bolter would be a Deathwatch shotgun, and even then that's stretching it by quite a bit. Austin Horner asks, spoilers for Officio Assassinorum Kingmaker, feel free to skip it if you haven't read it yet. Unfortunately, I've not read the book yet, and I probably won't be reading it for quite a while because I was planning on doing the Helbrecht novel next, but I just got a copy of the third Vaults of Terror book, so I want to finish that off first, and then I'll be doing the Helbrecht novel, and after that I'll probably be doing the Rogel Dawn novel because that's released in August, so yeah, it's gonna be a while I'm afraid, sorry. Brent Feast asks, sorry to hear that at least a month ago it was too bloody hot in both the UK and the US. It's a month later now, is it still too bloody hot? Oh, absolutely. The other week we hit 40°C, which is like unprecedented here in the UK. You know, and bear in mind, 1, we don't have aircon, and 2, our homes are built to retain heat. So you can imagine how delightful that was. Is there anything you're consistently surprised more people don't ask in these Q&As? I'm more surprised that people don't ask more of the meme questions, so to speak, but not really, no. Should I ask at least one 40k related question? It might help. Griffin of Might asks, is it possible for a blank or a pariah to become an Inquisitor? Absolutely. Anyone can become an Inquisitor providing they have the approval of 3 Inquisitors or a single Inquisitorial Lord. So it doesn't matter if you're a Sister of Battle, a Psyker, a Tech Priest, a Space Marine, a Mutant in the case of Lord Herrenvolk, it doesn't matter. So long as you have the approval of 3 Inquisitors or an Inquisitorial Lord, you can become an Inquisitor. May Sasquil asks, oh crikey, that's quite a long and verbose question. Let's see, TLDR. Do you think that Caiaphas Cain, hero of the Imperium, might be one of the seeded Glandhounds of Fabius Bile or an earlier version? I'll admit my knowledge regarding Caiaphas Cain's lore is not the best, I will freely admit that. From my understanding, his books are essentially highly dramatised or propagandized versions of events, so effectively the events that occur in those stories are to be taken with a pinch of salt to my understanding. And as far as I'm aware, he's not considerably larger or stronger than a typical baseline human. I know some of the novel artwork depicts him as being, like super buff and beefcake, but those same pictures also, depict him as wielding a bolt pistol where, to my knowledge in the novels, he uses a las pistol instead, so take that for what it's worth. If I had to guess, I'd say he wouldn't be, but again, this is going on my very limited knowledge of the character, sorry. Richard Martin asks, if you could make one retcon, what would it be? I would retcon the Exorcists back to being Grey Knight successors instead of the most generic of all Imperial Fist successors. What is your favourite obscure piece of 40k lore? Probably the Angel, the super weapon creature thing, whatever you want to call it, that was created by the Emperor before the Primarchs. And honestly, considering that the entire thing about the Angel was written by both Gav Thorpe and Graham McNeil, I'm genuinely surprised it hasn't been mentioned at least in passing in the Horus Heresy series yet. How was your day, sir? So far, okay I suppose, bit too warm, bit too humid, but otherwise okay, yeah. Zero Hits asks, we know that there is at least one Swarmlord in stasis. Given that the Swarmlord has greater individuality from the hive mind than other bioforms, what do you think having 2 or more Swarmlords active at any given time would do? Would one rebel against the hive mind, would they fight for dominance, or would they coordinate together to become an even greater threat than they were before? I assume you're asking in regards to having one particular Hive Fleet tender or having multiple Swarmlords at once, because as far as I'm aware, each individual Hive Fleet Tendril has its own Swarm Lord, or its own equivalent, like the Dagon Overlord, for example. I can't see one rebelling against the Hive Mind, with the only possible exception being Hive Fleet Hydra, which has been known to attack other Hive Fleets, but that's about it, really. If anything, I would imagine that the Hive Mind will just use them as a second, vessel to exert its will and influence over the lesser organisms. If I had to guess, effectively it'd be a situation where, when you absolutely need to overkill a planet kind of thing, Charlie Mink asks, what is your favourite Eldari craft world? Simhan, and that's mainly due to nostalgia because that was the very first craft world I saw in an issue of White Dwarf, plus the symbol's a snake, and snakes are cool. Do you think that the Inari should be developed more? Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's be honest, the Inari are a definition of a failed push at this point because, they got built up really huge at the end of 7th edition, they got a bit of a push at the start of 8th, and then by the time 9th edition came around, they fell off the face of the earth with one sentence mentioning them in the Grey Knight Codex, and then nothing until the Eldari Codex, which is effectively an afterthought at this point. If it was to mean they had much bigger plans in mind for the Inari, and then they just kind of changed their mind, so it's oh, let's do this, actually, no, let's not, kind of thing, it's very disappointing in a way, because they have such an interesting story in regards to the Eldari these days, and the fact that they started it and now just stopped it is just disappointing. It really is. Should the Tao Empire be less grimdark? I don't think it should be less grimdark, but at the same time, I don't think they should ramp it up either. I'm of the opinion that every faction in 40k, it shouldn't be any case of black or white. Everything in 40k should be shades of grey. Granted, the Tau Empire are a much paler shade of grey than compared to, say, the Drukhari, for instance. But at the same time, I don't think that they should get rid of that and make them a purely Noble-Bright faction. I mean, granted, make them more Noble-Bright in comparison to, say, the Imperium, the Eldari, whatever, but still give them that undercurrent of, I don't want to say edge because that sounds really stupid, but that undercurrent of darkness, as it were. They're a really naive and really hopeful species due in part to their galactic youth, essentially, that's slowly, ever so slowly, becoming more cynical and realizing, hey, do these other races in the galaxy have a point in regards to their violence and their xenophobia in regards to just simply staying alive in such a violent galaxy? That kind of thing. I suppose it depends on your personal preference, but personally, I don't think they should be more grimdark, but I don't think they should be any less either. And finally, Nova's Right Hand asks, do you think that humanity will be able to undergo the full biotransference process and turn themselves into beings like the Necrons, not the half and half process that pariahs go through? Theoretically, it's entirely possible. If I recall correctly, the Twice Dead King novels did mention how some of the Necrontyr brought their pets with them for the biotransference process, and that did turn them into things like the Canoptech Stalkers and stuff like that. Some of the Canoptech constructs the Necrons use today are actually biotransferenced organisms from the original Necrontyr homeworlds. So if those organisms can undergo biotransference as well, there's nothing out of the realm of possibility to say that humans can't either. So yes, it's entirely possible from a theoretical standpoint. And that concludes this edition of the Patreon Q&A sessions. As always, if you would like your questions answered, then click the link in the video description below and help support the channel by becoming a patron. Until next time, when it is hopefully much cooler, this has been Remlays from 40k Theories, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye!